What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Reformed Perspective. I am Pastor Josiah Espinoza, and today in studio, as always, I have my lovely wife, Princess Espinoza.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Yeah, I wanted to do more throughout the holidays, but it's just not possible to do more
It's
podcasts.
crazy. It gets crazy.
I always have my phone available too for those who want to chime in and ask your questions. I'll be checking up on Facebook with your questions, or you can just shoot me a text or something like that. I don't know, whatever y'all want. But, anyways, I have my tea here. I got my little black kettle tea.
You can't see it.
I can see it now. I got my little tea.
Me too. But I have chai. Mine's better.
I don't remember what's in this one. I know it's like black tea or
It has jasmine.
was it jasmine?
It's called happy tea.
Happy tea.
Our lovely friend gave it to us
I-
a long time ago.
I remember what the other one was. What's called? It's not immunity. It's immunity
Elixir.
elixir. That's what it was, and I cannot seem to find it. I'm gonna have to look for it another time because I really can't seem to find it. Oh wait, I found it. Dang, this is my jam right here, everybody. Immunity elixir tea from Zen Tea. Yes, Zen's tea. I'm gonna order some. I'm telling y'all, this is the best tea that you can buy. I'm gonna show you real quick a picture of it.
For all you people, the best
See it
tea
like
is
that.
chai.
Zen's tea. It's a little pricey, but I'm telling you, this kind of tea, you don't add anything to it. You don't add sugars. You don't add cream to it. You don't add French vanilla.
Chai tea is the
Well,
best.
anyways.
Don't you dare knock my French vanilla creamer. You love it.
But I love tea. Yeah, chai. No, you know what? Chai tea
It's bomb.
with creamer is pretty good too. I do like that quite a bit. And but how you been? Dude,
Me?
yeah.
I think he's asking you guys how y'all been.
No, how you been?
Been good.
Yeah.
Here. Quarantining.
Yeah, well, thankfully the kids tested negative today, which is great. So we can get back to some normalcy in our lives again. Last year, I got COVID. Now this year, some of the kids got COVID. Well, you and I got COVID last year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of the kids got COVID.
But they're okay. They were practically asymptomatic. So
Yeah, just with
Which is
a little bit of
nice.
headaches, and I think
just Jua.
Junior had some minor symptoms. But it's inevitable. It's gonna happen. I think everyone's just going to get it. They're just gonna get sick once in a while, and it's at this point. I think it would be meaningless to blame anyone for this thing because eventually people are just gonna get it. You know, like your parents got it too.
My parents, my brother, my sister.
Are you crying? No crying. Oh.
Their foster kids, I think, got it as well.
Yeah.
So,
It's just gonna happen. It's just one of those things that's just always gonna take place. And
your brother got it?
my brother, his fiance got it.
Fiance.
Yeah. It's just crazy how it hits different people differently. Some people zero symptoms. Some people get serious symptoms, and other people just pass away. And I think that's why everybody's terrified because of the possibility of dying. You know. But I do think about, okay, because you and I were both reformed, and so we both believe strongly in the sovereignty of God, and we believe, obviously, that as Christians, we should pursue caution and safety to the best of our abilities.
Mm-hmm.
But if the Lord is going to take us home, then whether it's COVID or a car accident or the regular flu
Mm-hmm.
or cancer or anything else, he's going to call us home one way or another. It's not like um, it's not like God is unaware of how he's going to bring you home,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so I don't know about what you think about this, but I think as Christians we need to be very careful not to blame each other.
How to what? I'm sorry.
We shouldn't be careful on whether or not we should blame each other for
Mm-hmm.
getting sick.
Oh,
We should be cautious. We should be
yeah.
super careful, but
Yeah, but the reality is that we don't know where we got it, even when we do get sick. Because even today, I had somebody from the city call me to kind of interview me to see how the kids are doing, if we needed anything. Since we were quarantining, I guess the city is offering groceries and stuff like that.
yeah.
But they also are doing kind of like a survey just to see who is getting it more. Like statistically, who is more prone to getting COVID.
Yeah.
So they wanted to know information such as our kids, gender and ages and such like that. Um, and
Like the demographics of the kids.
yeah, pretty much they wanted to know. And within that, they ended up asking me where they I think my kids contracted it. And I was like, I honestly cannot say because my kids sometimes come with me into the grocery store. They go to school, so they're in contact with other kids, and we go to church. So they're in contact, and even though our church isn't that big, but I'm like, they are still in contact
Of course.
with people.
Yeah.
So she was telling me that a lot of other people have said that they've gotten it from the store mostly. And I'm like, well,
It's gonna happen
it's
one
gonna
way or
happen.
another.
It really is. Like, it's unavoidable. You cannot
Those are
avoid
some
going to
dirty
the store.
shopping carts.
Like, you cannot avoid.
No matter how much you sanitize them, they're dirty. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you're gonna walk into the store and it's this enclosed space with a bunch of germs, people walking in and out. Like, it's unavoidable. So I just told her, I was like, honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, Walmart should be flagged as a super spreader.
For
Well,
sure.
you remember when
The gas station should be flagged.
yeah, for sure.
The gas station, because those are really tiny and people are in and out like crazy.
Yeah, and no one washes those door handles.
Nobody washes anything.
And I get it. Like, you can choose to be extra careful and wear gloves and wear masks and wear face shields and wear all the protective, equipment that you can if you choose to. But at the same time, remember when everybody was at Lowe's? Lowe's was like, it was the spot for a little while
Well, it's
during
because
the
everybody
pandemic.
was like going crazy. They were
Everyone was
getting
going stir
paid
crazy.
to work at home. So
Yeah.
they had all this extra time. So, of course, what are they going to do? Remodel your house. Like, if you don't do anything, you're going to go stir crazy. Like, there's no way you can just.
Yeah, and everybody's getting those stimulus checks.
Yeah. So everybody's like, let's remodel our house.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely happens. But it's just it's so weird how this pandemic, I feel like this pandemic, how do I say this? Like it accelerated a bunch of things that were kind of festering sociologically. And I feel like this pandemic accelerated some of the things going on in our culture today, including like critical race theory, the whole George Floyd. I don't think that if we were in a pandemic, it would have spread as powerfully as it did.
And that might be true just because, again, if you are not busying yourself with work, with school, with things that you normally would, you had all this extra time, you end up getting yourself into trouble.
Well, you take millions of people who have been forced to stay indoors, who are being told that they could die, who feel like their whole world is falling apart, and then you sensationalize an action of a police officer, a terrible action of a police officer towards a black man. Not to say that it's okay, but it's happened before in the past. George Floyd isn't the first, but it was in the midst of a very intense time. And people felt the weight and the pain of everything, not just that one experience of the police officer brutalizing George Floyd, but I feel like that accelerated everything. Because remember Chaz and Chop, all the do you remember that? Those communities that were kind of, that took over certain city blocks.
Oh my gosh,
And
in Seattle?
yeah. Yeah. And they created their own autonomous zones.
Whatever happened with that?
It disbanded.
Yeah.
Became extremely violent.
Well, not only that, but it's unsustainable. Like, where are they going to get their groceries? Where are they going to get, like, if you close everything off, then what?
What happens, it's hilarious that they created those autonomous zones, and the first thing they did was put patrolmen on the street with guns.
Yeah.
In order to prevent crime, and their murder rates were like through the roof in those areas compared to the rest of the city.
I just don't understand, like, why wasn't there justice in that? Like, why didn't they get all arrested for doing that? I don't understand why they allowed them to get away with that, because if you allow one community to get away with it, that means anybody else can get away with it.
Well, like I said, I think this is just an acceleration of the culture at large, is that people are not as willing to accept authority and discipline, and they cry out for justice, but they don't cry out for true justice. They cry out for what they think is sociologically correct.
Yeah, because there was a bunch of different things that were illegal, and there was no justice. There was no, I mean, all those rioting, nothing ever happened to them.
know.
Like, they got away with everything that they did.
Well, it's crazy just how quickly the society gets over these kinds of things.
Like, our chairs got stolen.
Oh yeah, we
During
ordered
that
chairs.
time.
We ordered chairs and they just never showed up, and we were like, man, they probably got jacked.
They probably robbed one of them Amazon trucks.
Yeah.
That's
The sea's
insane.
pretty good. But I know that it also accelerated like the transgender movements, because the transgender movement and the all the madness that came out of that also attached itself to the George Floyd movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. And somehow they robbed that movement. All of a sudden, justice for black communities became about justice for transgenderism. Transgenderism? Is that a word? Well, transgenders.
It is now. People invent things all the time.
And I feel like it accelerated it, because it's everywhere now. It's everywhere. And the population of the transgender movement is so small. It's tiny. And there's like really there's no way to counteract it other than biblical theology, in my opinion. Because I've seen people try to combat it with biological argument and sociological argument, and it doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold water.
You can't, especially when you take these people who have say that they're on the side of science, yet when you point out actual science at them or show them, it's not about science, it's about feeling and what they
Right.
desire. And the system has allowed them to change it in a
Hmm.
way where you're not even allowed to tell them that they're wrong anymore.
Exactly.
You're not allowed, anyone, like no counselor. There's certain states now that are not allowed to do what is it called? I forget what it's called, where you can't try to tell them that if they're born man, they should be a man, or if they're born woman.
Oh yeah, like rehabilitation, but I know what you're talking about.
They're not allowed to do that
Yeah.
in certain states anymore. It's criminalized now that you're not allowed to do. I'm gonna have to look up the word because
It's not transition therapy. It's another
it's
kind of
some type of
therapy. Some
therapy.
kind of therapy. I know what you're talking, but like when like if a homosexual or transgender
Hmm.
says, "I don't want to be a homosexual,"
Hmm.
or I want to believe that because I'm born a man, I want to be a man.
Hmm.
That kind of therapy shouldn't be allowed.
Hmm. Even within the church, they're trying to criminalize it
Mm,
within the church,
yeah,
even. So it's unfortunate. It's.
yeah. It's pretty radical what's
Hmm.
happening. And I was watching today or yesterday this clip from a guy named Matt Walsh. I don't know if you're familiar with Matt Walsh, but he went on the Dr. Phil show and he talked to transgenders,
Hmm.
kind of debated their position or their belief system.
Hmm.
So I'm just gonna kind of play it a little bit and see where it goes. But Matt Walsh here.
You're only a touch away.
Well, sorry, that's a commercial. There we go.
Ethan?
We've been together for about
5 years.
I've been married
For 3 years.
I use they, them pronouns. Being non-binary just means that I just don't identify with the gender I was assigned at birth, and I don't identify exclusively with being a man or woman. I'm something in between, outside of that binary.
My pronouns are he or they. I also identify as a
So that's crazy. The other he, she, whatever, identifies as they, them.
Hmm.
So when you talk about him, I don't know if it's a boy or girl. It's
Well,
most
that
likely
person.
it's probably a transgender woman, a man who was born a man and then has transitioned into a
Hmm.
female like
Hmm.
being. But
But even.
but even then, she or he is saying they're a they.
Mhm.
So when you talk about them,
And I think the reason why it's because it's a he, she. Like, I'm not trying to make
but
light.
this is I'm already confused.
Hmm.
He or she
Hmm.
doesn't want to be called he or she.
Hmm. Which is why they is the pronoun that they. I don't know. It's so
Theirs is
weird.
they want to be called they.
Yeah,
So
because it's not a he or a she. It's a they because it's both.
because it's neither.
It's both and neither.
It's neutral. It's non-binary.
It's
But see, there.
anyways, we should say he because he's a man. He's a man transitioning into a woman, and he wants to be called
It's
they.
madness.
Yeah.
I feel on one side that this is a cause of the catering to emotion and the catering to subjective feelings.
Hmm.
I feel this way, so therefore you should cater to my feelings.
Hmm.
And that's just not how truth works.
Do you think it comes from that thinking of I think therefore I am, I feel therefore I am?
Like a perverse notion, because
Hmm.
Rene Descartes, who said that,
Hmm.
was searching for truth, meaning of his reality.
Hmm.
He wanted to know why he was
Hmm.
and who he was.
And make sure that he actually was, and he wasn't just.
Right. Whereas they don't care whether or not they exist or whether or not they're in truth. They just want to be catered to in their feelings and in what they subjectively feel. So that's
It's madness. Just so y'all know, I am a millennial, but I do not. I am not.
we both are. Yeah.
This generation has just butchered our society. Like it truly has.
Well, I feel like there is still like even within the millennial generation, it's like a degradation of our own generation, you know, because I feel like I think like even for ourselves, I was born in 89, you were born in 90, but we were raised with certain principles that kind of were residual of the Generation X and the baby boomers.
I know, but I feel like there's so much that occurred within our generation that our generation didn't like about how we were being brought up, and therefore they chose to completely change it. For example, like they don't want us to discipline our kids anymore because they were disciplined. They don't want spankings because they were spanked. You know, they didn't want to be told who they're supposed to date. So they're not telling their kids who to date. They don't want to be told how to dress, so they're going to let their kids dress however they want to dress, whether it's female or male, you know.
It's an overall rejection of authority.
It's
That's
like
what
the
it is.
complete, they're trying to go the complete opposite of order.
Right, exactly. And there needs to be some kind of structural integrity of order. Like if there's no order, if there's no authority, then you have nothing but anarchy. And anarchy,
They're just animals.
yeah, you can't exist in a culture of anarchy or in a society of anarchy. If there is no structural integrity in society, if there is no hierarchy of authorities, then anyone can do whatever they want. And this is what's happening with this video. I'm gonna add your video right now. Hold on.
Non-binary. To me, being non-binary means having the sense of freedom to explore my gender in whichever way I want. I don't have to perform or pretend to be someone I'm not. I can be my authentic self.
It's really important for us to share more information with people because people are curious, they want to understand, but sometimes they don't always have the opportunities to do that.
Okay, so wait, so I think this one right here, this one right here is a female who transitioned into a male type
I don't think so. I think they were both male.
Well, that's the crazy thing is I truly believe that this one right here is a female who transitioned into a male. Oh, you're fine. Who genuinely transitioned into, because this one, whoever his name is, says his pronouns is he, them. I'm pretty sure he was born a she. And the other one was born a he, who is now they, them.
I don't know.
Who is now
I'm not gonna try.
has
and guess
certain
it.
traits of femininity. Yeah, anyways.
Is a hot topic.
Yes.
That's a good thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is it a good thing?
I guess because it creates dialogue and it invites conversation to learn about other people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are really confused about gender identity in these times, and it's good for us to have these conversations so people open their minds and relearn and unlearn to what we've been taught.
Right. And Addison, many people think gender pronouns are exclusive to the LGBTQ plus community, but that's a misconception, true?
Well, everybody has pronouns. Like, you may use he and him as your pronouns, right? I use they and them as my pronouns. We all may have a certain gender pronoun too, but I think it's important for people to understand that for trans and non-binary people, we often change our pronouns to reflect who we are when we come out and be who we are.
How do you explain the difference between sex and gender?
I consider sex to be our biological makeup. Our chromosomes, or hormones, our genitals is a biological makeup. But our gender is more of an internal sense. So think of it like this. Sex is what's between the legs, and gender is what's between the ears, right? It's not how...
Okay, so obviously when we were growing up, sex and gender were the same because scientifically, if you're gonna make science the objective method of interpreting truth, which is what they did for the last majority of the Enlightenment period, and since we're post Enlightenment, we're post modern. Science doesn't get to define objective truth. This is post-modernity. This is post-modernism. Is that biology, scientific truth doesn't get to define objective truth. What there is no objective truth in postmodern thinking. So, in this person's mind, biologically, it's true that they were born with male reproductive systems. That's true. But that doesn't get to define it finally and ultimately. Because truth is subjective. Although through scientific method, you could measure and you could weigh and you can...
Truth is not subjective. It's just their feeling is what defines who they are.
Right, but they'll admit this. They'll admit that scientifically, biologically, they're born a specific sex. But their gender is fluid. Gender is a social construct in their perspective. Gender roles, the way gender is understood in the postmodernist way of thinking, it's fluid because it's subjective. No one gets to define what it is other than the structural powers. This is where the concept of social justice comes in. Is if you have a minority group who is being what they would call disenfranchised or marginalized, meaning they're being kept out of the power structure that's causing them to be hurt or killed or cast into poverty or left out of certain goods and services that the rest of those in power have, then the justice of that would be to take those who have and give it to the have-nots. That's in their mind. That's justice, because the power structures to a certain degree is pushing them away. So the goal is to make sure you flatten out the power structures. And how do you flatten out power structures? You flatten out society. Because if men have power, then there is no man. It's fluid. You know, if authority has power, then there should be no authority. We're all equals. And that's what an egalitarian society looks like. Is that there's a flattening out of all the power structures, all the authorities, all the roles, including gender roles. Everyone's just equal. But when that happens, then that means you can be whatever you want to be, and even an amalgamation of the things in between. You know,
Like, it's so crazy because I was just thinking of the word minority, and up until the 2000s, minority just was talking about race. And within the last 20 years, it's changed from race to 50 million genders,
Yep.
which is insane.
Yeah, and part of what's happening here is you have people who are being told they're born into privileged societies. And so the only way that they can escape the title of being a supremacist or a racist or privileged is to adopt
A
a
victimhood
victim mentality or victim status. And so, for example, this guy here would have been an oppressor, a white male, a straight white. If he was just a heterosexual male who liked women, he would have been a straight white male. He wouldn't have any minority status. But now he has taken on to himself a minority status and is now able to play the victim card. Because you'll hear it a little bit as they talk.
How we see ourselves on the inside.
Okay. And that's something somebody can't know. Gender is something somebody can't know just by looking at somebody.
Yeah, because everyone is going to present and express themselves in a different way. I know it's very confusing, right? Everyone's like, what is going
Yeah.
on? But it's really
It's confusing.
about us breaking that assumption that we can tell someone's identity, someone's story, their pronouns, even their name, just based on how they look, right?
When
And
have
so
we been
how
able to
does
tell
someone-
names?
how does somebody clarify that? Ethan, how would you, what's the best way? What's the most comfortable way?
I think for me, to create a safe space for people to share their pronouns, I will say, "Hi, my name is Ethan. I use he or they pronouns. What about you?"
I think it's really important for us to recognize other people's pronouns because, again, we can't make that assumption. But for so many people who are cisgender, meaning that you do identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth, you're not transgender or not non-binary, I think a lot of people don't even question their pronouns because we already use them and it's already assumed correctly. But for so many trans and non-binary people, that isn't often assumed correctly. So we need to take the time to get to know people.
Cisgender, it says adjective that describes a person whose gender identity matches or aligns with the gender he or she was assigned at birth. Now, this would be what has been traditional for centuries, right? Why does it need a term?
You know, if we don't use that term, then we end up saying maybe real men or normal men or regular men, right? Or we just say men, and then we say maybe transgender men, right? And the thing is that we need to realize that trans women are women, trans men are men too, and so we just want to have a term for that.
No, we don't have to. Like, no, we don't have to do anything, right? That's the thing is, we, because we're in such a sensationalist, emotional culture, that unfortunately a lot of people just be like, well, that's how they feel, then so be it. But as Christians who believe in scripture, we can't accept that. So standing for truth is going to be all the more difficult and all the more dangerous for Christians, especially as we pursue truth. Because, and this is one of the issues I have with Christians that use a biological defense of gender and sex, is that biology ultimately is not the one who defined it. It's primarily God. And so if anyone asks, well, then how do you define male or man, or how do you define female? We have, our answer as Christians has to be, we define it as according to how God created us, according to his scriptures. The Bible gets to define because the Bible is the word of God. And if we're going to start with the biological, they have an answer for the biological. If we're going to start with the sociological, they have an answer for the sociological. We have to start primarily with the theological answer. Because if we don't start with God's authority first, then we're just playing games, semantic games with them on definition. So.
That privilege, that assumption that your gender identity is going to match the one that you were assigned at birth.
All right. And then transgender, adjective, describes a person whose gender identity does not match or align with the gender they were assigned at birth. And then non-binary describes a person whose gender identity does not fit into the traditional binary of man or woman. And that term can be abbreviated to, and how do you pronounce that?
Envy.
Envy.
Envy, yeah.
Okay. And
NB?
explain that.
I don't know what NB
For
is.
transgender people, we are assigned a sex at birth, and when we grow up, when there's a mismatch of how we view ourselves and how society views us, then we can choose to, either medically transition or just socially transition or both.
My name is Matt Walsh, and I've written a book called Johnny the Walrus. This book is about identity and imagination. He identifies as a walrus, and his mom's a little silly. She takes it seriously and thinks he really is a walrus. So she went on her phone, and there were people telling her that this isn't pretend, he's really a walrus. And his mother takes him to the doctor to have him surgically transition. He gets him walrus hormone pills. and then eventually tries to drop them off at a zoo to live with other walruses. Not only topping the Amazon charts, my book has taken the world by storm.
You're saying that
But it's it's funny to me that sorry, he's dumb, but that is the madness
Mentality.
of this mentality. You say walrus, that's ridiculous. How can a kid? Of course, a kid can't be a walrus. But then at the same time, we're trying to say that, or they're trying to say that boys can be girls and girls can be boys. It's the same madness. It's the same craziness.
there should be no construct of gender, just sex. You're either male or female,
Right.
and someone feeling in a mental, emotional way that they don't identify with the sex that they have been biologically created as and assigned at birth based on their genitalia. If they don't feel that way, that there's no construct that describes that, experiences that.
Well, that's got nothing to do with the reality. So you can feel however you want. I mean, I could sit here and say that I feel like a tomato plant, but that doesn't mean I'm actually in those things. So your self-perception, you can have whatever self-perception you want, but you can't expect me to take part in that self-perception or to take part in this kind of charade, this theatrical production. You don't get your own pronouns, just like you don't get your own prepositions or your own adjectives. You know, it's like if I were to tell you, my adjectives are handsome and brilliant, and no matter whatever you're talking about me, you have to describe me as handsome and brilliant because that's how I identify. It makes no sense. You don't get your own pronouns. That's grammar. That's language.
So you think it's a delusion? Someone is self-delusional.
Yeah, I think it's delusion. It could be mental illness. It could be it's a lot of with children. You know, there's also just a basic confusion that all kids have. Like that's why when you hear someone, a parent say, "Oh, my 4-year-old son came to me and said that I'm a girl now, and so that's what I'm gonna raise him as a girl." No, you're a 4-year-old. I have 4 kids. When a 4-year-old boy comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm a girl," here's a good follow-up question: what is a girl? Ask him what he means by that. What do you mean by a girl? And when you ask him that, here's what he'll tell you. He will tell you what he really means is that he wants to do some of the things that girls do, like play with the dollhouse, or you know, he likes the color pink. That's fine. Play with the dollhouse, but you're still a boy.
All right, there's gonna be commercials real quick, but so you see, it's madness.
I like their faces.
What do you mean?
I like their facial expressions when they're getting upset.
I know. Well, he says that they're delusional, which they are.
Yeah.
They have bought into a lie, and when you buy into a lie, you are deluded.
I'm like, at that point, I'm like, I'm a psychologist. Why can't I apply to be a psychologist and get paid bank?
You mean for Dr. Phil?
Sure. Dr. Phil. I identify as a psychologist. Can you hire me?
Yes. All right, let's see here.
Actually, because just like the 4-year-old can't answer what is a girl, well, this is one of the problems with this left-wing gender ideology, is that no one who espouses it can even tell you what these words mean. It's like, what is a woman?
Well-
Can you tell me what a woman is?
No, I can't. Because it's not for me to say. Womanhood looks different for
But that's true. It's not for them to say. So society doesn't get to define gender or sex. God has already defined it, and that's the truth. So the problem, the ultimate issue I have with Matt Walsh is he'll say that he's a practicing Catholic Christian, and he's conservative. So there's some things that he says that I'm like, okay, I can see his point of view, but he doesn't start theologically. It's always political. It's always a political debate with him. But for a Christian, if we're having that kind of conversation with somebody, our answer should be like, right, I don't get to define what sex and gender is, and you don't get to define what sex and gender is, because God has already defined it. And so we have to understand sex and gender in light of the scriptures and what that means. But the problem is the world doesn't want to know what that means. They hate God. And so they're not going to want to listen to the word of God.
Everybody.
What do you define a woman as?
An adult human female.
And what does a female mean?
Well,
How
that's
do you define it?
someone with female reproductive organs.
Okay.
Someone who's, here's the thing: when you're female, it goes right down to your bones, your DNA. So that's why if someone dies,
Okay.
we can dig up their bones 100 years from now. We have no idea what they believed in their head, but we can tell what sex they were because it's ingrained in every fiber of their being.
Interesting. So I'm trying to understand. Your definition is that a woman is someone who is female. You said, right?
Correct. There's a biological female.
So what happens if we have maybe someone who is female, identifies as a woman, right? Cisgender woman, right? As you just explained, but maybe doesn't have the ability to reproduce.
This is always the argument that they jump to, because his point was not that she was able to reproduce, but that she had the reproductive organs, right? But that doesn't mean that they're always going to have the ability to reproduce just because they have them. I don't know if you have anything to add to this.
No, I'm just listening.
All right. But, and I don't know what you think about this, but so it's true that God intrinsically, ontologically creates us, not just biologically, but in our image-bearing souls, we are male and female. That seems to be beyond just biology and sociology. Is that the imprint of God's image in us, whatever that soul being is, it's still male. And you're still female. So when you die, and you're absent, or to be absent from the body is to be present from the Lord, and you go before the Lord, you're going to stand before the Lord as female, whatever that entity is, because I don't know what it is, I don't know what it looks like, right? But whatever that entity is, it's female.
And I've always thought it to be that even though God has created us with different reproductive system and our different roles, within that, whatever characteristics that we do have, they imitate God's, in the sense of the man is the provider. He's the one with the strength. He's the one with the I don't know, everything that a man has. And then for the women, we're more nurturing. God is nurturing. God is comforting. And between the two of us, we have almost like an image bearer together of who Christ is.
Right. And I think that's true. But I think also that you alone, just by yourself, reflect the image of Christ, of God.
Well, I'm not saying that it takes for both of us in order to, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that each one of us have a reflection of who God is.
Right. So here's the thing is, this is what I'm thinking, at least, is it's pretty clear in Scripture that whoever we are in this body, right, it's to reflect what's in our souls, right? So they're supposed to be one and the same, and they were supposed to be like that forever, but Adam and Eve messed it up. So whatever it is that we are underneath the body, and that is the soul, whatever the soul or the spirit is, it reflects the image of God. Okay. But yet it still remains in its image, male and female. So he created them in their image, male and female, he created them. So if we were to die today and go into the presence of God, I would retain my maleness, you would retain your femaleness.
Yeah.
We would be able to identify still female and male characteristics of who we are. In this body, we reflect certain physical elements or characteristics of God in our maleness and in our femaleness. So we can, after we have stated that God ultimately has defined it, we can then, after that, argue from the position and say, because we're made in the image of God, therefore our biology reflects that. Therefore, our society should reflect that. Because as soon as the society says God doesn't get to define what a man and a woman are, then what they're saying is God hasn't created us in his image. I want to be in my own image. And that's what you're
The
seeing here.
reality is that's what they've already
That's what they're
done.
seeing, yeah, and that's what they're seeing. This is the moral degradation of a society. This is what happens in Judges. This is what happens in Romans. Is you'll see as God releases people to their depravity and to their sin, you'll see a moral degradation of the culture and of the society.
Maybe it doesn't have those organs that you're talking about that are reproductive organs.
I have answered the question. You stood up here and said trans women are women.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean. What is a woman?
Womanhood is something that, just as Ethan explained, I cannot define because I am not
But
myself.
you used the word. So what did you mean when you said trans women are women if you don't know what it means?
Right. So here's the thing. So I do not define what a woman is because I do not identify as a woman. Womanhood is something that is an umbrella term. It includes people
That
who
describes what?
identify as a woman.
And identify as what?
As a woman.
What is that?
Was to each their own. Each woman, each man, each person is going to have a different relation with their own gender identity and define it differently.
That doesn't
And so
come out.
trans women are women too. And you want to reduce. Listen.
Won't even tell me
You
what
want
the
to
word
reduce.
means, though. So
You
that's
want to
the problem.
reduce women. You want to reduce men down to maybe just their genetics, our genitals,
No.
our chromosomes, right? That's what you're
What
saying.
you want to do is
That's what
what you want to do is appropriate women. You want to appropriate womanhood
Okay.
and turn it into basically a costume that could be worn.
Anyways, you get the idea. So, I don't like his overall approach in terms of his debate tactic on how to talk to them. Obviously, he's more worried about making a, political stance than a theological one. But I use it because I want to be able to give us at least somewhat of a talking point to know how because here's the reality. We're going to have to deal with it as Christians. We can't shelter ourselves and we can't shelter our kids from this reality.
It is true. I mean, it might not be the way that we would approach it, but the fact that he's willing to stand up to that kind of mentality, even though he isn't a Christian, is something to be proud of. That he's not, even though he's not a believer, he is willing to say, regardless of what my faith is, this is not logical thinking.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think he made good points there. He was able to explain things, because it is true. Like, if you don't even know what womanhood is, then how can you say who is a woman? It would be like me saying, like, how do you know this is a spoon? Tell me. Why is this a spoon?
Yeah.
Nobody can say, like, oh, it's to each their own. Some people think that's a fork. Some people think that's a knife. It's like, no, this is a spoon. Tell me what why it's a spoon. It'd be the same thing.
Right. Sorry. I have another video I want to share. This one actually made me more upset than the last one. Okay, so Babylon Bee, right? Mm-hmm. Hilarious article, fake articles, satire, political satire, theological satire. When they first started off, I felt like they were reformed guys making fun of, like, theological debates within Christian circles. And that's what it felt like at first. And then they started getting a little bit into politics, and then now they've become primarily satire about politics. And so they're humorous, they're but But when I saw this clip of Babylon Bee talk, you know who Elon Musk is, right? A billionaire, very brilliant
Tesla.
dude, extremely brilliant guy. Probably the future of
Cars.
cars, of renewable energy, of so many things that the future is going to hold. And they talk about Christ and scriptural things with Elon in abysmal ways, horrible ways. I mean, ways that they make me angry. Like, I was getting mad listening to them talk to Elon about scripture, about Christ, and them just laughing about things instead of actually having the desire to see, or the desire to give Elon the truth of the gospel, the truth of the kingdom, and the truth of the scriptures. I was actually more angry at this video than I was at the previous video. So you'll see what I mean here in a little bit. It's abysmal. It's trash. I'll say this.
It was obviously very pro-alcohol, because one of his miracles was turning water into wine.
Yeah, it was like they were having a party. They ran out of wine. Okay. And they're like, let's keep this banner going. Who can solve this problem? We're in a White Claw. Friggin' stores closed. Jesus like, I gotcha. Okay. Water, now wine. I'm like, party on.
Again, that is a prime opportunity to be like, that's not the point of the story, Elon. The point of this, because they were laughing. I don't know if you heard them. They're like, "Ha ha, he made White Claw," or something like that. And that's not the point of the story, Elon. The point of the story is that he was proving himself to be Messiah. He was proving himself to be God in the flesh in that moment by doing supernatural miracles. And it was meant to portray his power to his disciples. But they're just there laughing, nodding their heads, as you'll see. Watch.
We're here. The Babylon Bee is a Christian organization, and we're a ministry.
Well, how come we're doing the show on a Sunday?
This is church.
Why are you heathens in church?
Exactly. So we have to make it church
This is
right
supposed to
now.
be a day of rest.
We did Zen church.
To
Just
justify
an idea, like God said, don't work on Sundays. Okay? Unless you go to bed, you're straight to hell for this one.
Get into the whole Jesus rest thing. Okay.
Straight to hell.
But this is church. This is church. So to make this church, we have to do, make sure. We're wondering if you could do us a quick, solid, and accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior.
A quick solid and accept Jesus Christ. Just making a mockery of the gospel. First, he's making fun of the fact that they're not in church, that they're going to hell because they're not observing the Sabbath.
Which technically is on Saturday.
Which technically is on Saturday, not Sunday. And they're like, well, that's why we're here together. We're trying to do church right now. It's like, you're making a mockery of the word of God. And then your presentation of the gospel is, can you do me a solid and accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior real quick? That's how he's presenting Christ to Elon right now. It's trash. That's what's happening right here.
Personal words. It's a big prayer.
It's a quick prayer. Did you hear that? Personal Lord Savior. It's a quick prayer. No mention of the law. No mention of God's sovereignty. No mention of God's holiness. No mention of depravity. No mention of sin. No mention of the blood. No mention of the sacrifice. Just do me a solid, bro. Accept Jesus Christ real quick. I was furious. I was so mad when I first...
When did you watch this?
I saw this like a few days ago, but I was furious at this. I was so mad. Oh, man. But listen to what he says. And listen to the response after this.
I mean, this is like, I agree with the principles that Jesus advocated. And that there's great wisdom in the teachings of Jesus, and I agree with those teachings. And things like turn the other cheek are very important, because as opposed to an eye for an eye leads everyone blind. So forgiveness, is important, and treating people as you would wish to be treated. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Very important.
Okay, so right there are so many things you can say to Elon that would appropriately and beautifully present the gospel. He said certain things. Turn the other cheek. What does that mean in light of Christ's sacrifice? How did Christ turn the other cheek? He talked about forgiveness. What about forgiveness? Is it just that we should forgive one another? Or is there an ultimate reality about the forgiveness of Christ that you can talk about? What about, not eye for an eye? What does that mean? People interpreted it as you can take vengeance for yourself, but we're not supposed to take vengeance for ourselves. What does that mean? What does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? And if you're not doing that, how do you find yourself righteous in the eyes of God if you can't even learn how to love your own neighbor as yourself? You're taking these philosophical principles of Christ and then not understanding the intention and the meaning of the gospel in light of those teachings. And this is their response.
So it's like a 60-70% yes?
As Einstein would say, I believe in the God of Spinoza.
Their response was, so that's a 60-70% yes? As if Christ is only worthy of 66% of your life. This is why I was angry at this video clip. And then I don't know if you understood what he just said.
I didn't hear part of it.
He said, I believe in the God of Spinoza. Spinoza was a Spanish or he's a European philosopher who I'm pretty sure rejected the idea of a personal God. That a God that was intricately involved in human affairs existed. Rather, he was just some ethereal being out in the nether regions of the universe, right? And he exists out there, but he has nothing to do with us. This is I think what Elon is referring to. That there could be some God out there who created us, but not really. I'm gonna keep playing.
But hey, if Jesus is saving people, I mean, I wouldn't stand in his way. They'll be sure, I'll be saved.
Sweet, you did it.
I think he just said yes.
We got it.
I think he just said yes. They just said, sweet, we did it. I think he just said yes. And then they clap. For being satirical, they're making a satire of the gospel. That's the problem here. They're making a satire of the message of salvation. And just to be cool, just to be,
just to follow suit of what their other videos
the
are
fact
about.
that they have a clip with a billionaire that's probably only going to be used as marketing. They don't want to sound too radical. They don't want to sound too in your face about it. They'd rather just be like, hey, do me a solid, bro. Can you accept Jesus? And then he literally makes Christ into a philosopher, denies the existence of an intimate and personal God. And they're like, all right, he did it. It's like, this is why I was angry.
The Spinoza believed that God is the sum of the natural and physical laws of the universe and certainly not an individual entity or creator.
Okay, so then there you go. Spinoza rejects God altogether. For Spinoza, God is just the things that kind of create laws and physics in the universe.
Like Mother Nature.
Well, I would say even less personal than that. I would say when you can do simple math equations or physical math equations, that's God. Because it's constant, it's consistent. It's never changing. So that's God. Like
But
gravity.
it says natural
Yeah, natural, like the natural order of things.
and physical laws.
Yeah. So like the law of gravity, that's God because it's never changing. It's ongoing.
What's the difference between natural and physical laws?
Just I would say the things that occur in nature, whereas physical is like things that can be measured or weighed.
You want to get baptized or anything?
Oh, it's baptized.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's done.
I'm telling you, this made me angry. It was I can't finish it, but it's a mockery of the gospel. Oh, you want to get baptized now? I got a water bottle right here. And then he goes on to talk about like how he was baptized as a kid, and he talks about communion and how he think it's weird that they were taking the body and blood of Christ, that they're cannibals, and then he says even that
That's in the Catholic Church, though.
I know that's why. And that's why, and then he goes on to say, but even like thinking of it as a metaphor, it's weird. And they don't correct them. They don't open the scriptures. They don't talk about John chapter 6. They don't talk about the sacrifice of Christ and the meaning of that and the intention behind that. And it's an abysmal, horrible display of what I think is pretty normal now in Christian circles. It's just get them to believe the bare minimum and have them kind of accept Christ, and he's a Christian. And that's unfortunate because
Say the prayer.
that's just leading people straight into hell rather than into salvation or into the true gospel. So anyways, those are the two video clips I
Does
have
he
for
end
today.
up accepting Christ?
Honestly, I couldn't finish it because I was mad. Because I was angry. I was like, dude, seriously, what is going on?
I would want to read the comments on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the comments on there are probably like, half of them are like, yeah, you guys did great, this is funny, hilarious, and the other half are probably like, this is trash. You guys trashed Christ. You guys trashed the word. You guys trashed God. You guys trashed baptism. You guys trashed communion. They
had the perfect opportunity.
Yeah. They
blew
were
it.
successfully trashed Christ, church, God, the two sacraments of the church, and the scriptures. They just let Elon just blurt out some random philosophies of Christ instead of actually opening up the scripture with him and showing him the words of Christ. So I'm very disappointed, to say the least. Very disappointed, appalled, disgusted with the Babylon Bee. Even though I think their political satire is funny. But that was abysmal. And if that's how they assume their ministry is, if that's how they're doing ministry, they're not doing ministry. They're not doing ministry. Anyways, that's enough of my ramblings. Anything else?
It's just unfortunate. We have to be careful. This shows and proves the fact that we may follow certain people on the internet and think that a lot of their stuff that they display, that they, the videos that they post, or the, little comments here and there, or their, what are they called? Quoting them, might be good. They might post, awesome things here and there. But the reality is that we don't know these people. We don't know them. And therefore, things like this occur where we see, because even they say that they're a Christian organization, but then they don't stand up for truth at all.
Yeah.
At all. So we have to be very careful with, always thinking that we're going to agree with somebody. Or, if somebody says, they're not being biblical, to get mad at one another and say, how dare you? Because the reality is you don't know. You don't know who they are.
Right.
You only know what they allow you to see. And a lot of the times it's the good things, not the bad things. Not, we see a lot of satirical, videos from the Babylon Bee in this example. But the reality is we don't know their actual biblical teachings. We don't know what church they go to. We don't know their theology. We don't know, anything else. Do they actually serve in a church, or are they just at home and say they, we don't know.
We don't know.
So
yeah,
we need to be careful.
Yep.
Very careful.
And especially when it comes to conservative politics and conservative politicians and conservative political commentators, it's easy to assume that just because they're conservative that they're somehow standing for truth or Christian biblical positions. Matt Walsh doesn't stand for biblical truth. Jordan Peterson doesn't stand for biblical truth. Ben Shapiro doesn't stand for biblical truth.
No. And that's why when I listen to these kinds of people, I know they're not believers. So I don't hold them to the standards of believers. Sometimes I'm like, oh, they said really good things. Like, I think Matt Walsh said pretty good things. But I'm taking it in a secular side. And that's why I'm not getting mad at him, because I'm like, he's Catholic. He's not a believer.
Right.
And he's taking a stand. Good for him. He's taking a stand, knowing the difference between what's logical and illogical. But if he was a believer taking that stance, that would be different. We would be saying, why would you take that stance? Why wouldn't you point them back to scripture, And the Babylon Bee, even more so, because they claim to be believers and they butchered everything.
Yep.
Everything they had.
Everything.
And awesome opportunity, and they just...
I guarantee if it wasn't on a podcast and it wasn't with a billionaire, they probably would have taken the time to talk to that person about the scriptures and about the gospel. Now, again, I'm just assuming here. But because it was on a podcast, because it was with a billionaire, they probably felt like, man, we'll just make it light. We won't really talk about Christ or the things of Christ. So, anyways, that made me mad. All right, y'all. Well, I appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see when's the next time we can do another one. But all right, family. Appreciate you guys. Hope you guys have a good night, and we'll see you guys next time.